Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And today we are chatting about a very heavy topic, but a very necessary topic. And that's about grooming. And joining me is Jodi. She's the author of the book Groomed, which I 100% recommend you read this because you don't think about males being groomed. You think about females being groomed. And I don't know if it's because I've been watching Law and Order SVU a lot, but I'm like so recognized. I'm like, oh, I see that. I see that. I see that. Yeah, I see that. So Jodi, welcome to the show. Before we start talking about your book and why you wrote it, tell us about yourself.
So a little bit about me. I consider myself an author by happenstance. That's something that I sought out to do or ever thought about reading a book, and we'll touch upon that a little later. I'm also kind of an armchair psychologist, and by trade, I'm a marketing consultant. I kind of live for sarcasm. I love existential conversations and just understanding what makes people tick. This is my very first book of fiction, and I chose a doozy of a topic.
That's a doozy, yeah.
But I actually feel like the topic chose me. But I really feel like you said it's a real necessary narrative. So I'm so glad that this story chose me to be.
Yeah, and I'm glad you wrote the story because it opened my eyes to a lot of things. Because, like I said at the beginning, you don't really necessarily think of a male being groomed because you hear all these people being sex trafficked and things like that, and it's all women most of the time, or the Me Too movement. And this was based on a true story, correct?
Yes, it is. It is. It's based on a true story. How the book all came about. It was literally during the pandemic, and a really good friend of mine, he and I have been friends for like over 30 years. Our thing was watching TV shows together over the phone. And so we were watching something one evening and something triggered him and he started talking about his first wife. And it was just after he finished the story, I was just like, you realize you were groomed, right? And he's like, what? And so we had this conversation about it, and it was just like a huge chandelier moment for him. So I gave him some journal prompts to kind of help him work through the realization. And he was like, you're really, really good at this. He's just like, this has been really helpful. He's like, you should write a book. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you should write a book about this. I'm like, are you serious? And literally, no lie, about a half hour after he said that, I went upstairs to my office. And 25 minutes later, I had an outline for the book. It like came to me like that. So I called him back and I kind of told him what I was thinking about. He's just like, you totally have to do that. So he even went as far as he sent me his journal.
Oh,
He went as far, he's just like, take whatever you need. He was just like, this needs to happen. So that's basically how the book came to fruition. Again, it wasn't something that I was looking to do. It just kind of happened organically, and here we are.
well, I can't even imagine someone trusting you enough with their journal, with their deep personal thoughts to give it to you and say, here, run with it. Take what you need to write this book. Can't even imagine that.
It's a testament to 30 plus years of friendship. He and I have been friends since the 8th grade. So yeah, there's a lot of trust there.
But yeah, there has to be a lot of trust because I don't even think I could hand my journal over to somebody. My husband, I've been married to for 30 years. I don't think I would want him to know everything. So yeah, 100% trust. So let's talk about what grooming is. And your book is called Groomed, but let's talk about what it is because a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's just somebody that they just pick up homeless or street kids or runaways or things like that. But it's not necessarily that.
No,
It is.
kind of the general description is kind of an emotional, it's emotional abuse at the end of the day. It's a form of emotional abuse. And it's emotional manipulation to kind of gain trust, power, and control over someone to get what you want. So that's kind of the general description. And, this kind of plays out in two different ways. Typically, what you see, it's an older individual who preys on someone younger to manipulate them into some sort of sexual relationship. And the other side of that, which is also touched upon in the book, is society also manipulates and grooms citizens to create social norms that kind of So we kind of touch upon both of the dichotomies in the book, but that essentially is what grooming is.
I mean, I can't even imagine, a lot of people, like I said, I watch a lot of Law and Order SVU because I've been going back and I'm like, you know how you binge watch a show? You're like, okay, I'm done. I need something else. And I'm like, well, this is 27 seasons. I think I'm going to be good for a while. But I saw a lot of that. I was like, maybe this book was sent to me during this particular time because I think we booked back in what, March or so. And it was like, because God knew that I was going to be watching SVU and that I was going to drive home all these important things that you wrote about in the book.
I love the serendipitous moments like this.
I love the fact that you took the male, like you said, you based it on your friend's story, but you took that male point of view, but you also added some three-dimensional characters that they intersect with each other that I was not expecting. I can't give away too much, but they intersect in a way that you're like, what? What did I just read? Let me go back and read this again. Because it's like, you think about it, it does happen in real life where you find like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You know how that goes. Where somebody knows somebody, or Kevin Bacon was in this movie and then he's attached and all these people, that's how it goes. And you did exactly that. Was that actually something that happened in real life? Or was that something
Actually,
that
it wasn't. That
Okay.
was an element that I decided to add to the book just because I wanted to have some more connective tissue. And I also wanted to show, April's character, her level of manipulation outside of her relationship with the main character, Milo. So I thought that was a really, really good way to, intersect all of those things and bring the story to light. So yeah, I had a little fun and little creative license with that.
That's very creative, but I was a twist that the readers do not see coming. And I will say, I did not see it coming. I did not even expect anything about it. But what did your friend think about it when you handed it to him or you sent it to him and said, here's the book?
Yeah, and it was funny as I was writing and, each part of the book that I wrote, I would share it with him just to get his feedback to make sure there were things that he was comfortable with. I took a lot of care and concern with that to make sure that he was okay and that the representation was going to be good. So the twist that you're talking about, it took him a minute, and then he was like, "Oh my God." He was like, so he called me. He was just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did this. This is so cool." So he really liked that twist in the book. He's like, "I totally didn't see that coming." And he's just like, "Wow, I wasn't expecting you to do something like that." He's like, "I love it." He was like, "Run." So when I first said, he was like, "Run with it." Because I surprised him at first. I didn't let him see it. And I was just like, "Okay, I'm going to wait till I'm finished with everything and let him read it." So once he read it, he was like, "I so wasn't expecting that." He was just like, "Oh my God, I'd give you an Oscar if I could."
So why did you decide to write it? You said you wrote it because your friend told you his story and it was kind of sent to you. Why did you feel so empowered that you needed to write this book, that this needed to be out in the world?
To be honest with you, the fact that I saw it as a sign, the fact that he said you should write the story, and literally it was a brain dump that came into my head that I could just totally visualize what this whole thing could look like and was able to map it out in like a half an hour. I think that was kind of a sign that
Yeah.
it was meant for me. And not to mention the fact to know that someone that I'm so close to went through something like that, and it was the pandemic and it was really, really heavy for him. I mean, we were all isolated, so it wasn't like he had community that could distract him. So, in the beginning of the book, he talks about he doesn't like being alone with his own thoughts. That's really how it hit him. And it was really difficult just sitting without, again, having that community or having things to connect to distract him from that. So he really had to sit in it and think about it because, it happened to him, but the realization, this aha moment, didn't come until like 20 years later. And
Mhm.
so, reconciling, I mean, he was already married again, the whole 9 yards, and then to have a pandemic and then to have something this heavy dropped on you. Yeah. So again, he's someone that I love dearly. And again, to think that someone would do that to someone else, to manipulate them to that extent for their own gain, it was unsettling. It was really unsettling. So I was just like, and every narrative that I had heard before that, when you hear of grooming, you usually think about the teacher student
Mhm.
scenario. That's all you ever hear about. Rarely do you hear a scenario like this where it was someone who wasn't too much older. There was what a 7-year age gap, but there wasn't that connection. It wasn't a power dynamic of a teacher and a student. They went to church together. And so, you wouldn't have expected something from a scenario like that, nor had I heard a story where that was the situation. Again, it's always been that teacher student dynamic. So telling it at that time, and then of course during the pandemic, Me Too was all over the place. You couldn't turn on a TV without hearing it. But again, it was all the female narrative. Very rarely, if at all, did you hear a male narrative. So I saw an opportunity to kind of educate and put a story out there that hadn't been told.
And I love the fact that you told it in such a way that the your characters, well, it was based on a true story, but your characters are human. He finds a great group of friends that he can, and then something happens and he explodes, and his friend, the friend that he wasn't even a friend with before that, was like, I'm here for you, man. And it's all about coming back, because it was during the pandemic. You even wrote the pandemic into the book, which I love that. He finds a group that they can social distance and exercise together, which I
Yeah,
think everybody was like, oh, I've been there, I've done that. I know how my thoughts are like intrusive during this time, because we had to sit with it because we were alone most of the time.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that you built that in.
Yeah, and I think it's important for men in general to find that sense of community, and how they work out their problems. They worked it out on the field, and they were able to talk with one another. And like you said, he got to a breaking point where he just kind of exploded, but that community was still there to support him, and who knew that it was going to trigger him in that way. So, even though we were distanced, people were finding their ways to deal with the situation. And I wanted to touch upon that from a very male perspective, and how many of them, may have dealt with something. And this was kind of unique. You don't hear many men having, groups that go out to a football field and work out every day, before work. So it was kind of interesting and unique. He was telling me that, he had done something like that. I'm like, oh my God, that's a perfect angle that I can put into the book. So did a little research and was able to implement that.
Yeah, because in the beginning, he's kind of like a solitary figure. I mean, he has his mom, and he has his friends and stuff, but it was like what he went through was just like solitary. He was just kind of going with the flow, and he just thought this was supposed to be okay for everybody else to do, that this is what happened to everybody.
Well, to be honest with you, it's also a symptom of grooming. Part of the grooming process is isolating someone from what's familiar to them. So as you saw, as he was going through, he really was being isolated. April became his everything. And, he no longer was associating with friends that he used to hang out with, things of that nature. So that, again, that's just a symptom of the isolation that comes in a grooming situation where, again, everything kind of falls off, and you're solely dependent on that person.
I love how it's kind of parallel to the isolation that we felt with the pandemic, and then the isolation with grooming, and so people can actually recognize what it feels like.
Yeah.
I love that. So we need to take a brief commercial break, but when we come back, you're going to read part of your book.
Awesome.
People welcomed me, and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. Feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
In a world full of chaos, she chose to anchor her story in hope. Through storms and silence, she found strength, and now she's inviting you to do the same. This isn't just a book. It's a lifeline. For every woman who's ever felt unseen, your healing begins here, anchored in hope, available now.
And we are back with Jodi, and she's going to read part of her book, Groomed, which I think is important. important to read. So, Jodi, it's all yours.
Okay, great. I'm reading towards the end of the book where the main character Milo is preparing for a podcast that he's going to go on. So, how apropos that we're doing a podcast today, and I'm going to read this section of the book. Preparing for this podcast has been pitch perfect and off key. That's not a complaint, just an observation. I'm a musician, so I tend to experience nuances differently. At first, I was journaling away my angst without any structure. Then Bones came along, put me in a trance. Now I've made peace with being an inconvenient truth. I was groomed, tricked by sexual platitudes into a marriage where I was a chore on a managed care to-do list for a woman whose pet peeves were monogamy and kindness. Yes, that's a mouthful, but it's easier said than being counting emotional scars to justify reality. The reality is that some people walk through the world with an unimpeachable morality. The rest of us are just collateral damage. It is what it is.
And I love that 100%. I mean, you're so funny that you're talking about the podcast episode because one of the highlights was our broadcast company wants to ride the momentum of the Me Too movement and give it a fresh voice. Because at the end of the day, sexual and emotional abuse are true crimes. The carnage just looks different. And so far, the narrative has only been about men abusing women, but men are victim too, and not just the hands of other men. The Mrs. Robinsons of the world have their fair share of body counts too. And I love that. And I love the fact that you say, that the Mrs. Robinsons, because you got to think about it. Normally, they think you're a macho guy if you're with an older woman instead of thinking it's a grooming thing.
Yeah, that's something that really stuck out for me is that there is a double standard when it comes to men and women. Women are held to a pillar of chasteness, while men are encouraged to go out there and sow their oats. And to be honest with you, sex is kind of seen as a right for men. So I think that's what really makes it difficult for abuse to be labeled when it's happening to a male, is the fact that that's that right, and so you're supposed to man up. But you know, young men are a lot more sensitive actually than girls, and so things like this happen. It's really difficult for them to deal with, and the power dynamic of an age gap brings a lot more collateral damage than manning up can solve. At the end of the day, they really aren't emotionally equipped to deal with that, but again, society puts those norms on them, and it's an asterisk that isn't talked about a lot, but needs to be talked about, because when those things happen, they don't feel like they have a safe space to be able to speak about that. And by nature are taught not to be vulnerable or to speak about these things. So when they do happen, it's like the Milo situation where it's 20 years later before he really has that aha moment as what's to happen to him, and having to deal with it. So again, that's another reason why I think this book is an important conversation, or at least to give some exposure to how this thing can manifest and happen to anybody.
Now, how much research besides the journal and talking to your friend did you do to write this book?
Oh my God. I'm kind of an armchair psychologist. So I read a lot of psychology journals about grooming, characteristics, things of that nature. I watched TV shows. I watched some movies that, touched upon on the topic. I talked to a couple of people who were willing to share their stories with me as well, just to see if there were, any parallels, or if there were any patterns that were repeating in the stories that I was hearing. So yeah, there was quite a bit of research that went in before I actually, dove in and started to write.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So you said when you started talking to your friend, 25 minutes, you had the outline, but how long did it take you to write the actual book?
A little over 2 years.
Okay. You didn't know where your characters were going, or was it because it was such a dense subject that you had to take a step back and say, okay, I got to stop for a while because I was finding myself in the dregs of what was going on?
Yeah, it was the latter. It was because it was so heavy. It was very heavy, heavy topic to write about. And I found myself channeling a lot as well, channeling a lot of the characters. Oftentimes I could hear them speaking to me. I would have something written or outlined that, I was going to start writing. And then when I started writing, I could literally hear dialogue in my head of what was what was going on and being able to write. And after those kind of sessions, that was very draining, very, very draining. So, and this isn't a romance novel by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it's not.
It's a very heavy topic with a lot of heavy themes, and I wanted to be able to demonstrate the vulnerability and the chaos that goes on in a person's head. Something like this happens. I start off each chapter of the book with kind of a little blurb of, and you get kind of insight of, like I said, the chaos that's going on in Milo's head. It's usually something tied to some societal issues or whatever before we go into the chapter. And that was intentional. Again, I wanted people to understand the kind of conversations that he was having with himself, dealing with this in isolation and the impact that it was having on him.
So you talk about this is a very dense subject and you had to take breaks. How did you make sure that you didn't get so caught up and so like your emotions, because obviously you're caught up, you're emotionally bonded with your characters. How did you take care of yourself during this time?
My husband was wonderful. He was wonderful. He made sure that I was taking breaks and he was there to have conversations with me. Of course, my friend too, I would talk to him oftentimes and, we have lots of cry sessions together. And I'd be like, I'd be writing something. I'm just like, I can't believe that you're still mentally functioning after going through something like this. I'm like, I'm writing about it and it's ripping me apart. So I can only imagine what it was like for you. Yeah, taking lots of little breaks. And, you know, I weaved humor into it. That was by choice. There's a lot of humor, there's a lot of dark humor in the book. And I found in my research that that dark humor is often um, a symptom or a byproduct of trauma. So once I learned that, I thought that that would be a really unique connective tissue. People seem to connect over humor. And so, with so much trauma in the book, I thought that it would be important to infuse that humor into it. And like I said, knowing that it was kind of a psychological byproduct of that was great. So, if nothing else, it created lots of moments for me to write jokes about comedy so I could make sure that that connective tissue was there. I did a lot of people watching too. Writing in the voice of a 50-year-old man is not the easiest thing to do, so I spent time in parks listening to smack talk going on all over the place from older gentlemen, and that helped a lot too, the people watching and listening, to help me not only connect with the characters but also give me an outlet, kind of a comedic outlet. It didn't feel so burdensome.
Made you just brought up something that you wrote from the point of view of a 50-year-old man. What made you decide to do that instead of doing a narrative, like a third person narrative?
I really don't know. I just thought it would be interesting to hear his mindset as a 50-year-old man experiencing this and then going back and forth between past and present, what was happening, and then how he's dealing with it in the current situation. I just felt that was a more impactful way to tell the story. And then again, weaving in the whole pandemic and the isolation, I just felt that there was more connective tissue there that people could relate to going through that. I don't think I thought too much about it, about writing it from the lens of a 50-year-old. It's just, my friend was 50 when
Yeah.
he, realized this was happening. I don't know that I gave it much thought. Yeah, writing in a male voice was very liberating. Let me say that.
I like how you said you went to the park and watched old men smack talk each other so you could kind of get into the character. But do you think it's because you had that journal? You had his journal and you knew what his point of view was. So you were like, I'm just going to play off of that then?
No, my friend's naturally funny, and again, we've got a 30+ year relationship. I've known him since the 8th grade, so I know what makes him tick. I know his personality probably better than my own at this point. So it wasn't that difficult, but like, for some of the other characters and just, some of the things that he was relaying and people that we grew up with, I would ask him a lot of questions about, some of the people that he was around, especially in church or what have you. So I could try to capture that. And so, like I said, being in those environments and listening to those things, I wanted that voice to be genuine.
Yeah. One of the things that really kind of irked me a little bit was the fact that her family, the lady that was grooming, was like, somebody has to take care of her. Somebody has to be there because she's sick, talking about sickle cell, which is something that I think I'm glad you brought that up because that's another disease that is not really known about a lot. So I love how you brought not only grooming, but sickle cell, because sickle cell, you need to have that awareness too, as well. So what made you decide to play her family like that? Or was it?
This was something he had conveyed to me, and the family was very narcissistic at the end of the day. Because if you think about it, it wasn't just her, but you see her sisters also demonstrating those same behaviors. So, they were very elitist and thought that, they didn't have a whole lot of accountability and they just felt free to do whatever they want to with the consequences. They didn't care the collateral damage of their actions at all whatsoever. And they kind of inbred that into their girls. And, I think April's illness just kind of compounded it and empowered her a bit more to be able to leverage that to her advantage and just really made her a mean person.
Yeah, I wanted to slap her so many times.
And me writing it wanted to slap her. I was just like, oh, so many days where it was just like, ooh, I was just like, I had so much angst with her on a daily basis. She was probably half the reason why I had to take breaks was writing her character. And I was just like, oh my God, why are you doing this? It's like, why are you just so mean spirited? And again, just thinking that, my friend went through this and how did you stay married to this person? Was just beyond my realm of goodness. Talk about unconditional love.
Only 100% unconditional love, because some of the stuff that she put him through, I'm like, oh my gosh, the first time.
No, that just also, it was a really good lesson for me to understand that you can't always expect people to react the way you want them to in situation. We don't know how we're going to react in any kind of situation. And writing this book was a real testament and a real answer to a real eye opener for me. Trauma shows up in different ways for different people, and people react to trauma and in ways that we may not comprehend or understand. It is one thing to say, if I were in that situation, I would do this. No, you may not do that.
Yeah.
Trauma makes you do things that don't make sense. And I really wanted to capture that. And it was something that was hard for me to grapple with. But I'm like, yeah, this now does make sense. It's just like you think about people who go through abuse and why do they stay in situations? It's very, very complicated and it is very, very nuanced. And like I said, I wanted to show that in the book so people understand that people don't react the way that you think that they will or the way that you want them to in these situations because what's happening to them is nonsensical. So you can't expect their reaction to it to be sensible.
And so you didn't know this was happening when he was married to his first wife. So can you imagine the shock? I can't even imagine the shock when he's telling you this during COVID about everything that was happened. And you're like, what? Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see it?
Exactly. Because we didn't live near one another when, he was going through all of this. So yeah, I was completely oblivious to it. I'm like, oh my God, I know you had problems in the marriage and that you were separated at some point in time. And I knew that she had illness, but I had no idea that all of this was going on in the background. So yeah, it was something. It was really, really something.
So that brings me to the next point. So let's talk about the shame of people that are actually groomed because they don't feel like they can reach out to anybody and they don't know, like that's the only thing they know. So they think that they kind of deserve what's happening to them.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes they don't know what's happened to them, and by the time they realize it, it's too late.
Mhm.
And like you said, they think that they deserve it, just like, well, as it says in the book, this is I have to sleep in the bed that I've made. These are the choices that I've made. I'm stuck with this now. And I think I think his religious upbringing had a lot to do with that as well. Him father being a minister, him witnessing his parents go through a divorce, which also traumatized him. He didn't want to go down that same path. And he had made a vow to himself that he wasn't going to go down that same path. So that was, in a sense, kind of him not breaking that vow that he had made.
Mhm.
And kind of, like I said, taking his lumps. But I do think people deal with that in their own way, where they think that they've made a choice, and because they've made that choice, that they have to deal with the consequence of that choice, and that manifests in many different ways. And he was very emotionally immature when he entered into this relationship, and I honestly think that the relationship stunted his emotional growth. And it's great seeing him now as a mature male being able to reconcile this and know that he's in a healthy relationship, that he learned from those mistakes. Not everybody does that, but he was fortunate that he was able to grow from the mistake and learn and not make it and be like, I'm not going to find myself in this. So he ended up marrying someone who he considered to be a really good friend, as opposed to the situation he found himself in when he was 17.
Yeah, that's true. I would love to know the conversation that um had with his wife, his current wife, about his old wife. What kind of conversation was that? Was there kind of a healing process for him to be able to open up and to have love for her?
Yeah, yeah. From my understanding, the two of them were really good friends, and I guess she knew April. So they actually, were friends and had double dated and the whole nine yards. So she kind of saw some of the things that had happened in the relationship. They were good friends. I don't think she knew to the extent, but she knew about the illness and some of the things that were going on. So she was privy to some of that information. And like I said, she actually, had met his first wife. So I don't think a lot of it came as a surprise. And again, the fact that they were friends, I think really kind of helped with the healing, and that, she was understanding of that in some way, shape, or form, I think, helped the relationship. I don't know if they hadn't, this is just my opinion. I don't know that if they had been friends, had the relationship happened, I think she probably would have run kicking and screaming in the opposite direction. So the fact that they had that bond of friendship, I think really stabilized the situation for them.
Yeah, and there's another quote in there. There's a couple of things, but one of them says, "You can't control the circumstances we're born into, Milo, but we can control how we allow them to impact us. You're your own moral majority." And I think that's very important, because sometimes we can't control the circumstances that happen in our lives. We just have to worry about how it's going to affect us, though.
Yeah, exactly. Not only us, but the other people who are in our sphere. That's also really, really important. And again, in my opinion, Milo is a real testament of unconditional love.
He was, because of the things in the book that happened to him, even when he joined what was it, the Air Force? I know he joined. I couldn't remember. I was like, I think it's the Air Force, because we're near Air Force Base, so that's why it stuck in my head. And he went off, and she didn't go with him.
Yeah.
And somebody else moved in with her. And I was like,
What? How soul crushing is that? To know that you're off, serving your country and trying to make a better life, and not to mention the fact her family talks him into it, and then all of this happens. And how crushing, and for her and her family just to be very flippant about the whole thing. Yeah, and then so his reaction to all of that, you have to give him a pass.
yeah.
You have to somewhat give him a pass for that. But
But then also too, he also realizes his reactions were wrong. He can see, he's his own moral compass. He could see, hey, you know what? I reacted in the moment, but that wasn't the right reaction. Let me see how I can redeem myself. And he does redeem himself, and I love that.
he does, he does. Yeah, yeah.
So you talked about your husband being your like self-care, helping you out. What did he think of the book when he was reading it? Or did you let him read it all along as you were going through it, or you waited like you did with your friend and gave it to him after it was done?
Well, actually, my friend was the one who read it like kind of chapter by chapter, because
Oh.
I wanted to get his buy-in and blessing, and making sure that I wasn't overstepping any boundaries or going someplace he didn't want me to go with it. My husband, on the other hand, I let him read bits and pieces, like if I was struggling with something, maybe to get his opinion on something, but he really didn't read it until I was finished with
What was his opinion of it when it was
it.
finished?
He absolutely loved it. He was just like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you could write like this." He was just like, "How in the world?" He's just like, "How did you write in a male voice?" And then I had to remind him, and it's like, "You have to remember, I grew up around all boys. So yeah, I'm like, I'm used to being around a bunch of foul-mouthed, sweaty, stinky boys all the time. So it made kind of sense for me. But yeah, he was really impressed, and he was just like, "Oh my God, you totally have to publish this."
So did he see the twist coming at the end either?
He totally didn't see the twist, and at first I think it confused him a little bit, and then he was just like, "Oh my God!" Then when he had that aha moment, he was just like, "Oh my God, that was genius." So yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was so genius because it's the way people can see the outer appearance of somebody and it's totally different from what they actually are. It's like we all put this kind of facade out to the public, but in private we're a totally different person. So I love the fact that you pulled that out.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and that was kind of the little piece that I owned for me. I'm like, I'm not sharing this with anybody until I have it all fleshed out. So that was a nice little happy surprise that I was able to put out there.
And there was another quote that was in the book that I really loved. And it said, "The pursuit of happiness is the cause of our unhappiness."
God, yes.
Why did you decide to write that one? Because I was like, man, that is so true.
And honestly and truly is. It was probably one of those late nights my husband laughed. He used to call them me having sixes. And what he meant by sixes is that there was one evening that I was writing, and it was really late at night. I'm a creative person, so I find most of my inspiration at night. So it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning on a weekend, and he was just like, "Oh, you coming to bed?" I was just like, I was just like, "I just want to finish this up. I'm gonna be done in about half an hour or so." He's just like, "Oh, you're probably not coming to bed until about 6." Well, lo and behold, I came to bed at like 5. So, it was late at night where I kind of had that epiphany that yes, the pursuit of happiness, it's kind of like that other quote I had, kind of chasing your tail. And
Mhm.
what do you do when you finally catch it? That's kind of it. We chase after things. Often that in that chasing, we make ourselves unhappy. I have a friend of an older friend of mine who's a mentor who says life is easy, we make it hard, and that's also very true. And like I said, that us pursuing that happiness, because happiness is a moving target. So what makes us happy one moment could make us miserable in the next. So that's kind of where that all came from. Is that thinking about all of those things simultaneously? I was just like, yeah, and that saying kind of popped into my head. I'm like, oh my God, that's just the truest thing ever. The pursuit of happiness is often what causes us to be the unhappiest in life.
Yeah, because we're always searching. We're not, when we get what we want, we're not happy with it. We're always searching for the next best thing.
Exactly.
Don't relish what we have, which I hope you are relishing the fact that you wrote this incredible book. You're savoring it and not doing your next best thing right now.
No, no. It has taken me a lot to come down from writing this book. I'm like, oh my God, I just need to go watch cartoons for the next year. After writing it. So yeah, it took an emotional toll, and I was just like, yeah, no. People keep saying, when's your next book coming out? I'm like, probably the day after never. And I've also got questions about about, am I going to spin off any of these characters? I'm like, I don't care if I ever write about any of these characters ever again. They really drained me. They took a lot out of me. So I was just like, no, I don't think you're ever going to see me writing about these characters.
So maybe you should write something that's more uplifting.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe I do need to write a cartoon or
Children's book or something.
something, because I was just like, God, for my very first endeavor, I was just like, I was like, this was a doozy. I don't know what made me do this, but like I said, I really feel like the story chose me. I didn't choose it, because this isn't something that I ever envisioned in a million years me doing. So, but I'm very proud of what I was able to create. Most importantly, that my friend that it was based on, that he has a huge sense of pride in the book, and the portrayal in the book. So that, if nothing else, that just makes my heart smile.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you some flowers right now and tell you that you need to write more books because you have such a gift for writing, even if it's not a heavy duty one like this one, but you have a gift for writing. And I believe that God gave you that gift to share it with the world. So I'm putting
Thank
that
you
out
so
there.
much. That means the world, honestly and truly. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that.
And the fact that you can write it from a 50-year-old male character's voice, that tells you something how good of a writer you are. Now I'm not joking. I literally had to look up and I'm like, Jodi, is it a male or a female writing this book? Because, you know, I've got your bio from everything from your publisher or from your publicist, but I was like, is it a male or a female? Because it could be either way, the name. And I'm like, what? Then I said, whoa, wow, she really did a great job because you actually feel like it's a man writing the book. You actually feel like that's his experience.
Yeah, like I said, the nights with multiple characters, they were most of the male characters. I literally could was channeling them and could hear their voices in my head. Again, I really feel like this was some sort of ordained thing for me to do to be able to write this book and the topic as well. Because, had I chosen to write a book, this would not have been the topic of choice. This would not have been the topic of choice. But I'm really glad that I was able to do it and hopefully do it justice. In that it generates a lot of conversations. Again, this isn't something that people talk about, and it's uncomfortable. And I've had people who know me who have read the book, and I was just like, I have to, preface it. It was just like, okay, you have to understand that this is not me at all whatsoever. And people read it and be like, oh my God, this is so far removed from you and your personality and who you are. How are you able to do that? I'm like, honestly and truly, I have no idea.
Because I can tell by your personality that it's totally different from because you're laughing and joking and you're just having a good time. We're having this conversation. And in the book, it's not like that. It's like the person is almost like it had no self-esteem whatsoever. Like they were trapped in this marriage, this first marriage. And even in the second marriage, he still didn't feel like he was a complete person. And so I love the fact that you were able to kind of take that and run with it and not have your personality shine through. Of course, you said some of the dark humor and stuff like that, the comedy did shine through, but that was your way of putting your mark on the book to say this is your voice as well. But I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that somebody appreciated that. Someone appreciated that. Because like I said, it's not me at all whatsoever. And people are reading the book, they were just like, whoa. And they would have never expected me to write something. I'm like, yeah, I didn't expect it from myself.
Yeah,
So it's just a testament that, when something's meant to happen, it happens.
for sure. Now, our time is almost up. Is there one thing that either we've talked about that you want to reiterate or something that we haven't touched on that you want to talk about? The floor is yours right now.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand trauma. And like I said earlier, that, trauma doesn't always look the way we think it's going to look. Emotional abuse is effective because there aren't physical scars. It's emotional abuse. So it's a lot that happens to the person mentally that you can't see or maybe pinpoint. And to give people grace when you're seeing these kind of things happen and knowing that they may not react or or handle the situation the way that you think that they will. So, show them some kindness, show them some grace, do a little bit more reading and understand that just because it's not something that you can see physically doesn't mean that abuse isn't happening.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Jodi, thank you for coming on. Thank you for writing this book. The first one out of the gate, such a heavy topic, but such a necessary topic. I cannot wait to see what else is down the road for you. I know you're laughing at this because you said you're not going to write another one, but you never know. Another book may come to you because you got to write this one within 25 minutes. You had the outline for this book. So
So who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
it's a book available on Amazon.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, wherever you buy your books, it's basically where you can find it.
Get in touch with you if they want to talk more about the book.
Yeah, follow me on Instagram. I love interacting with people on social media. At Jodi Paschal author on Instagram, and I also have a website, Jodi Paschal 6. It's on Wix, and again, social media. If I would love for people to follow me and have some deeper conversations around this, and hopefully go buy the book.
Yes, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. I will 100% say you need to buy this book because it's a book that I think every parent needs to read. Every parent needs to have this conversation with their child about what could happen. Because I think if your friend's parent had a conversation with him before he got so deep into the relationship, it might not have happened to him as well.
Yes.
So Jodi, thank you for coming on and for writing the book, for sharing your lovely, bubbly personality on such a dark subject to make it so that people will learn something from the book. The book is not just entertaining, but it's also educational as well, to show people the sides of all different things in this book. And I love that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to talk about this and to have the conversation. So for having this platform so people can be exposed to these types of things. So thank you.
You're welcome. And so, guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Jodi, as well as where you can find the book. And until next time, bye. Well, friends, that's it for today's chat here in the Blog Cabin. I hope something we shared sparked a thought, warmed your heart, or gave you a little encouragement for your journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a new conversation. And if you'd like to spread a little love, leave a review or share this episode with someone who needs it. Remember, this little cabin isn't just mine, it's ours. It's a space where we show up, share stories, and shine a little light together. Until next time, keep living with hope, keep anchoring yourself in love, and never forget, you've got a seat saved here in the Blog Cabin. Take care, friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.